Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Before we start today's story, please let us know your location in the comment section and don't forget to like and subscribe. The engine of my truck roared as I pulled into the driveway, the weight of 30 years behind the wheel pressing on me like a second skin. I'd come home early before, but this time felt different. There was no text, no phone call to let Emily know I was on my way. I wanted to see my family as they truly were, not the polished version they put on when they knew I was coming. What I didn't expect was the blaring music from the house. One of the songs Emily used to love back when we were in our 20s. My boots hit the steps as I moved closer, catching glimpses of shadows through the curtains. When I opened the door, I found Emily standing in the living room, her back to me, wearing something I'd never expect on our anniversary. Her hair was done, her makeup flawless, but it wasn't for me. My brother Tyler stood across from her, holding a beer, grinning like he owned the place. "What's this?" I said, my voice slicing through the air like a blade. Both of them froze. Tyler looked at me like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar, and Emily turned slowly, her face tight with barely concealed annoyance. "You're early," she said, as though that were the issue. "I am? Clearly, that's a problem." My eyes darted between them, catching the way Emily subtly adjusted her tank top and the way Tyler avoided my gaze. "It's not what it looks like," Emily said, crossing her arms. The words stung, but it was the flicker of panic in her eyes that told me I'd walked in on something I wasn't supposed to see. I didn't respond, my mind racing. The years spent on the road, the nights away from home, and Tyler always stepping in to help. It suddenly all seemed too convenient, too well-timed. Something inside me cracked, but I swallowed it down. "Is that what you'd say to the boys if they walked in right now?" I asked quietly. Her eyes widened, and Tyler stepped forward, his hands up like I was about to swing at him. "Hey, let's not make this a thing, man," he said. "It's not." I snapped coldly, my voice final. Tyler stepped back. Emily looked at me, lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. In that silence, I felt the first real fracture of trust, a splintering I knew I couldn't ignore. And in that moment, I decided I wouldn't. The following morning, I couldn't shake the tension in my chest. Emily acted like nothing had happened, humming as she made breakfast, while Tyler was nowhere to be seen. The boys, Jason and Caleb, chattered away at the table, oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind. I sat there, picking at my food, replaying the scene from the night before. The way Emily had been dressed, Tyler's smirk, the way they froze when I walked in. I needed answers, but I wasn't going to tip my hand just yet. After breakfast, I went to the truck stop, hoping to clear my head. That's when I saw it again, the ad for the DNA test. This time, it didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like a sign. By the end of the week, the test kits arrived. I told Emily I'd gotten them as part of a school project for Jason and Caleb, a way for them to learn about their ancestry. She raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. I swabbed their cheeks myself, my hands steady even though my heart felt like it might burst. The waiting nearly killed me. I stayed out late in the truck, claiming I was preparing for another haul, but really, I couldn't stand being in the same house as her. Every time I saw Emily, every time she smiled at me, it felt like a lie. The results came 2 weeks later. I opened the email while sitting in my truck, parked at the edge of a gas station lot. My eyes scanned the screen. Once, twice, 3 times, before I slammed my fist into the dashboard so hard that the glove compartment popped open. Not a match. Neither Jason nor Caleb shared my DNA. I sat there, my chest heaving as the betrayal hit me like a tidal wave. All those years of working myself to the bone for my family, missing moments with the boys, and to find out they weren't even mine. It was crushing. I drove home in a daze, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I pulled into the driveway, Tyler's car was there again, and my heart raced as I stepped inside. There he was, sitting at the kitchen table with Emily, laughing like everything was normal. "You've got some nerve," I said, my voice low but heavy with menace. Tyler's smile faltered when he saw the look on my face. Emily's expression shifted from confusion to irritation. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. I pulled out my phone and held up the DNA results for her to see. "Care to explain this?" Her eyes flicked to the screen, and for a split second, I saw it, a crack in her armor. But then she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Are you serious right now? You're really going to bring this up in front of Tyler? Well, he's part of this, isn't he?" I turned to my brother, who looked like he wanted to disappear. "Go ahead, Tyler. Tell me the truth. How long have you been screwing my wife?" Emily gasped, but Tyler raised his hands defensively. "Oh man, that's not what's happening here. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Blowing this out of proportion? I barked out a bitter laugh. Neither of my sons are mine, and you're telling me I'm overreacting? Emily stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. Don't you dare make this about Tyler. You were never here. I raised those boys on my own while you were out playing trucker hero. Maybe if you'd been around more, you wouldn't have to ask stupid questions like this. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't backing down. Not this time. So it's true. Tyler's their father? Her silence spoke volumes. Tyler tried to say something, but I cut him off, my voice shaking with rage. Get out of my house. Both of you. Emily opened her mouth to argue, but I pointed to the door. Or I'll make you regret staying. They left, Emily dragging Tyler by the arm as their car pulled away. I stood in the doorway, staring at the spot where they had been, the weight of their betrayal pressing down on me. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The silence in the house after they left was deafening. The boys were upstairs, oblivious to the chaos downstairs. I sat in the dim kitchen, the DNA results still open on my phone, the words searing into my brain. No match. My hands trembled as I poured myself a drink, but the whiskey didn't dull the sharp edge of betrayal cutting through me. I couldn't stop replaying everything. The years of absence, how Emily always seemed to have Tyler on speed dial whenever I wasn't around. I thought I was providing for my family, but now I knew Tyler had been filling the void I left behind. The next few days were a blur. Emily stayed with Tyler, taking the boys with her. She said it was for the best, claiming I was too angry to be around them. That part wasn't a lie. I was furious, so angry it felt like it could burn me alive. But it wasn't just about Emily or even Tyler. It was about everything I'd sacrificed, every moment I'd missed, only to find out it had all been for nothing. I needed clarity, so I went to my lawyer, Dan. He was the no-nonsense type, the kind who told you the truth even when you didn't want to hear it. I laid everything out for him. The DNA results, the years of lies, and the fact that Tyler was their biological father. Dan sighed, rubbing his temples. This isn't going to be easy, he said. Legally, you're still their father, but if Tyler pushes for parental rights, especially now that the DNA proves his paternity, the court might side with him. And Emily? I asked, my voice tight. She'll back him, Dan said flatly. She wants out, and Tyler gives her the easiest path. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. But Dan wasn't finished. Listen, he said, leaning forward. We can fight this, but it's going to get ugly. And even if we win, you're looking at years of tension and a mess that could ruin you financially. You need to decide what's worth fighting for. That night, I sat in my truck, staring out at the dark highway stretching ahead of me. I'd spent my life solving problems with hard work and determination, but this wasn't a problem I could solve that way. This was personal. And that's when the idea hit me. A cold, calculated plan forming in the back of my mind. If the court wasn't going to deliver justice, I'd take matters into my own hands. But it couldn't be reckless. It had to be calculated, undeniable, and above all, untraceable. I began plotting, using every spare moment between hauls to gather the pieces I needed. I made calls, dug into Tyler's finances, and uncovered everything I could. What I found made my blood boil. Tyler and Emily had been planning this for years. Tyler had put his name on their bank accounts, secured a home for them, and even started pushing for full custody of the boys. On the day of the custody hearing, I walked into that courtroom with determination, my resolve as hard as steel. Tyler and Emily were sitting side by side, grinning like they were already victorious. The boys were under the care of a court-appointed advocate, unaware of the battle being fought over their future. When the judge ruled in Tyler's favor, granting him partial custody and the right to be listed as the boy's legal father, I didn't show any emotion. No outbursts, no argument. I simply nodded and walked out. They thought they'd won, but they had no idea that I'd already set the wheels of my revenge in motion. In the days that followed, I kept my head down. I knew that any sudden move or emotional outburst would give them ammunition to use against me. Let them think they had broken me. In truth, I was more focused than ever. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place, and I just had to wait for the right moment. After the hearing, Tyler had the nerve to approach me in the parking lot, putting on his best concerned brother act, like we were still family. Look, man, he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. I didn't mean for things to get this far, but the boys deserve stability. And Emily, well, she deserves someone who can be there for her. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. His smug tone, the way he acted like I had handed him my family, it made my skin crawl. But I just nodded. my voice steady. You're right, I said. They deserve the best. His grin widened, clearly thinking he had me. The next few weeks were eerily quiet. Emily and Tyler moved into a new house, a lavish place on the outskirts of town. Far too grand for Tyler, whose lifestyle had been supported by my hard work for years. I began making routine visits to places Tyler frequented, the bar he liked, the mechanic shop where he had his car serviced. I wasn't looking for trouble. I was gathering intel, piecing together his habits. Tyler was predictable, lazy even. He stuck to the same routines, never straying from the patterns I had already learned. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances, just a man doing his job, rebuilding his life. But in the back of my mind, my plan was steadily taking shape. One night, after a long haul, I stopped at a diner on the outskirts of town. As I sipped my coffee, I overheard two guys at the counter talking about a logging truck that had plowed through a fence on private property. The owner had been blamed for the damage because the fence wasn't properly marked. That conversation sparked something in me. What if something similar could happen to Tyler? Something big enough to send a message, but not so reckless that it would point back to me? I refined my plan, making it airtight. The timing had to be perfect. Emily and Tyler were hosting a housewarming party, their new life on display for all to see. It was the perfect backdrop for what I was about to do. That night, I parked my truck a few miles down the road and waited. I had studied every detail of their property, the incline of the driveway, the weak spots in the landscaping, the positioning of the house near a wooded area. As the music and laughter spilled out of the house, I revved the engine. My heart raced. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my pride, everything they had stolen from me. Then I hit the gas. The truck surged forward, headlights cutting through the darkness. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, every muscle in my body focused. This wasn't just a man driving a truck. It was a storm, years of betrayal and pain building to this single moment. The closer I got to their house, the more I could feel it. The louder the music grew, the more the chatter of their guests became faintly audible, even over the rumbling engine. It was almost fitting. Emily and Tyler inside, basking in the illusion of their stolen happiness, completely unaware of what was coming. As I neared the driveway, I slowed down, just enough to time it perfectly. A large SUV was parked across the street, blocking any clear view from the house. The property was surrounded by trees, and the driveway curved gently uphill before opening to the front yard. Everything about this moment felt inevitable, like it had been building for years. I slammed on the gas. The truck roared as it tore through the wooden gate, tires ripping up gravel. Guests screamed as the truck sped toward the house, the massive front windows reflecting my headlights. Tyler appeared in the doorway, his face frozen in shock and terror. At the last second, I swerved, avoiding a direct hit on the house, and instead plowed through the landscaped front yard. The truck screeched to a halt, the bumper just inches from the porch steps. The impact shook the ground, knocking over a set of garden lights and sending sparks flying into the air. The sudden silence that followed was deafening. I stepped out of the truck, the crunch of my boots on the ruined gravel sounding too loud. Tyler stumbled backward, tripping over the threshold, as Emily appeared behind him, her face twisted with a mix of fury and fear. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed, her voice breaking. Tyler tried to shield her, raising his hands. "You've lost your mind, man." "Maybe I have," I said, my voice calm, eerily controlled. I walked up to the truck, placing a hand on the hood as I stared at them. "But you took everything from me, so now we're even." Emily's face drained of color. "This isn't over, you psycho. We'll have you arrested," she yelled. I tilted my head, cutting her off. "For what? An accident?" I gestured to the truck. "I'm just a tired trucker who lost control on a bad turn. It happens, doesn't it?" Tyler's jaw clenched as his eyes flickered to the gathering crowd of stunned guests on the lawn. No one said a word. No one dared. I turned back to Emily, leaning in close enough to see the panic in her eyes. "This is what it feels like to have your life shattered, Emily. You can't fix this with lies or lawyers." I climbed back into the truck, the engine rumbling as I reversed out of the wreckage. As I glanced back at the house, at the broken yard, the shattered confidence on their faces, I realized it wasn't everything I had lost, but it was a start. Driving away into the night, I knew something for certain. They would never look at me the same way again. For the first time, I wasn't the man who sacrificed for them. I was the man who made them pay. The night after the incident, I parked my truck in its usual spot at the depot, wiping dirt and sweat from my hands. I had driven straight to my company's garage, where the minimal damage to the truck, thanks to my careful planning, was chalked up to a mishap during a late-night delivery. No questions asked. That's the beauty of a reputation built on reliability. People trust you even when they shouldn't. But the aftermath of my revenge wasn't as simple as leaving the wreckage behind. By the time I got home, my phone was blowing up with messages, frantic voicemails from Emily, Tyler's weak attempts to sound intimidating, and even a few calls from the sheriff's office. It didn't matter. I had covered my tracks too well for them to pin anything on me. The next day, I woke up to the sight of two sheriff's deputies standing at my front door. Their presence didn't shake me. I was ready for this. "Are you Roy Walker?" one of them asked, his tone brisk. "That's me," I said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "We've got some questions about an incident at your brother's place last night," one of the deputies said. "Witnesses reported seeing your truck on the property." I scratched my chin, feigning confusion. "Yeah, about that," I replied, putting on an innocent tone. "I was headed home from a run and must have missed a turn. The roads out there are pretty rough, you know." I stopped to check my GPS, but when I saw all those people, I realized I'd made a mistake and just got out of there. The deputies exchanged a look, their skepticism barely hidden. "Mind if we take a look at your truck?" the other one asked. "Go ahead," I said, stepping aside. They spent the next 20 minutes inspecting every inch of the vehicle. I'd made sure there was nothing incriminating, no debris, no visible damage, nothing that could link me to the destruction at Tyler's place. When they finally left, I exhaled slowly. I'd won the first round. The real victory came later that afternoon when I got a call from Dan. "I've got news," he said, his voice clipped. "The court's reviewing Tyler's custody agreement. Your little stunt rattled them enough to look into his finances and Emily's situation. Turns out Tyler's been hiding some debt, and Emily's job history isn't stable enough to guarantee a good home for the boys." I leaned back in my chair, the pieces of my plan falling into place. "What does that mean for me?" I asked. "It means the court might reconsider you as the boy's legal father," Dan said. "But you've got to play it straight from here on out. No more accidents." I smirked, knowing full well I had already achieved my goal. By the end of the week, Emily and Tyler were scrambling to fix the damage. Not just to their yard, but to their perfect little facade. Meanwhile, I went about my life, focused and calculated. The world thought I was moving on, but in reality, I was just waiting for the next crack in their armor to show. The beauty of revenge wasn't just in the act. It was in watching the ripple effect, knowing that every move I made sent their world spiraling. The fallout from the night at Tyler's house spread quickly. Small-town gossip moves fast, and by the next morning, everyone knew about the accident. People whispered about how a truck had nearly flattened Tyler's perfect suburban dream. Though no one outright said it, they all knew it was me. Emily's lawyer filed for a restraining order, citing the incident as proof that I was a danger to her and the boys. I had expected that move. What they didn't expect was that I had already prepared my counterstrike. When the court hearing for the restraining order arrived, I walked in with my lawyer, Dan, carrying a thick folder of evidence. Emily sat across from us, flanked by Tyler, both of them looking smug, certain they had me cornered. The judge opened with the accusations against me. Reckless behavior, endangering my family, showing up unannounced. When it was my turn to speak, Dan stood and calmly placed the folder on the judge's bench. "These are financial records for Mr. Tyler Walker," Dan began, his voice steady. "They show a consistent pattern of unpaid debts, fraudulent loans, and a failed business venture that nearly left him bankrupt last year." Tyler's face drained of color. Dan continued, "And here are messages between Emily Walker and Tyler spanning over a decade. They suggest an ongoing affair during the marriage, as well as their plans to manipulate custody proceedings in their favor." Emily shot to her feet, her voice trembling with outrage. "That's a lie," she shouted. The judge slammed his gavel. "Sit down, Mrs. Walker." I stayed silent, letting Dan handle everything. He painted a clear picture. Emily and Tyler weren't the responsible parents they claimed to be. They were reckless, deceitful, and unfit to have custody of Jason and Caleb. By the end of the hearing, the judge didn't grant the restraining order. Instead, he ordered a deeper investigation into Tyler's finances and Emily's living situation. As we left the courtroom, Emily shot me a glare that could have melted steel. Tyler tried to keep his head down, but I caught the look of pure rage burning beneath the surface. "Enjoy the spotlight," I told them as I walked past. "It's not over yet." Even as I played the part of the calm, collected man reclaiming his dignity, my real plan was still in motion. Late one night, parked at a rest stop miles from town, I made a call to an old friend, a man who specialized in fixing problems the law couldn't touch. "I need information," I said, keeping my voice low. I needed airtight proof on Tyler Walker, something that would leave no room for doubt. Over the next few weeks, I gathered the pieces of the puzzle. Tyler had a gambling addiction, borrowing money from some dangerous individuals, and his debts were quickly catching up with him. More importantly, he had been using funds from Emily's accounts to cover his tracks, all without her knowledge. When the full picture came together, it wasn't just a scandal. It was a ticking time bomb. All I had to do was light the fuse, and I knew exactly when to strike. The custody review hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. By then, I would have everything I needed to make sure Emily and Tyler's perfect little world came crashing down. Until then, I kept driving, kept waiting, and kept the fire inside me burning. This was no longer just revenge, it was justice. As the custody review hearing approached, every day felt like the noose was tightening around Tyler and Emily, not me. The information I had gathered was a loaded gun, and I was about to aim it squarely at the heart of their lies. In the weeks following the courtroom drama, Tyler started to unravel. Word about his gambling debt spread, thanks to a few anonymous tips I made to the right people. Suddenly, the whispers around town shifted focus. They were no longer about me, but about Tyler's shady dealings. Emily, of course, had no idea what was really happening. She probably thought life was just throwing her one curveball after another. What she didn't know was that each curveball had my fingerprints all over it. I made sure to stay visible in town, keeping up appearances, smiling at neighbors, and even volunteering to coach Caleb's little league team when another dad dropped out. The kids didn't know anything about the custody battle or the DNA test. So to them, I was still their dad, and I planned to keep it that way. But Emily was on edge. She tried to confront me once outside a grocery store, her face flushed with anger. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" she hissed. I didn't take the bait. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Emily. Everything I've done has been for the boys." Her jaw tightened. "This isn't over. You don't win." "We'll see," I said, walking away. The night before the custody hearing, I received the final piece of the puzzle. My friend on the road had outdone himself. He handed me bank transfer records, loan agreements, and even an email thread where Tyler admitted to falsifying his income to secure a loan for the house he and Emily were living in. The documents were airtight, undeniable, and devastating. I walked into the hearing the next morning with quiet confidence. Tyler and Emily sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, their lawyer trying to look composed, but failing miserably. When it was my turn to present my case, I handed the judge a thick stack of evidence. "Your Honor," my lawyer began, "we have reason to believe that Mr. Tyler Walker and Mrs. Emily Walker are not only unfit to share custody, but have also actively endangered the children's financial and emotional well-being through deceit and mismanagement." The room fell silent as the judge flipped through the pages. The tension was palpable, and I could see Tyler squirming in his seat, sweat beading on his forehead. When the judge finally looked up, his expression was cold. "This is troubling, to say the least," he said. Tyler stammered. "That's not what it looks like. I can explain." The judge cut him off. "You'll have a chance to explain during the investigation. For now, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order against Mr. Walker, and custody of the children will remain with their legal father, Roy Walker, until further notice." Emily's gasp filled the room as Tyler buried his face in his hands, but I wasn't celebrating yet. I knew this wasn't over. As I left the courtroom, I could feel Emily's glare burning into my back. She wasn't going to give up easily, and neither was Tyler. That was fine. I still had one final move to make, the kind they'd never see coming. The days leading up to the custody review hearing passed with quiet intensity. Tyler and Emily retreated, licking their wounds, but I knew better than to think they were finished. They'd lost the latest battle, but the war wasn't over. Then, on a late Friday night, the call came in. An old friend from the trucking depot, who knew about my situation, passed on a chilling tip. Tyler and Emily were planning to use the boys as leverage in one last desperate attempt to destroy me. The details were vague, but it was clear they were desperate, and desperate people made dangerous moves. Sitting in the cab of my truck, I stared at the phone, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wasn't going to let them win, not after everything. The pieces of my plan were already in place. I'd spent weeks preparing, making sure that what I was about to do would leave no trail back to me. This wasn't an impulse. It was the culmination of months of betrayal, calculation, and resolve. I made one last call to Dan, my lawyer, to confirm that the custody case was still in my favor and that there was no way they could legally regain control of the boys. Then, I pulled up a map of Tyler's property, marking every angle, every point of approach. By the time I arrived at their house, the night was quiet. Their lights were still on, and I could hear muffled laughter from inside. They were celebrating something, probably another scheme. I parked my truck a safe distance away and double-checked everything. The trajectory, the speed, the structural weaknesses I'd scoped out during earlier reconnaissance drives. If done right, it would look like a tragic accident, one that would leave them shaken but unscathed, while making it clear they were no longer untouchable. The plan wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message they'd never forget. I eased the truck into gear, my heart pounding, but my mind calm. Every turn of the wheel, every second ticking by, felt like stepping further into a moment I couldn't undo, but I wasn't turning back. As I approached the house, I saw Tyler through the large bay window, holding a drink and laughing with Emily. That image burned into my memory, the two of them carefree, basking in the comfort of a life built on my sacrifice. I floored the accelerator, and the truck roared to life, barreling through the driveway and crashing into the front yard. Lights flickered, screams echoed from inside, and the heavy front bumper collided with the porch, shattering the wood into splinters. I hit the brakes just in time to avoid destroying the entire house. Smoke billowed from the engine as I stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel. Tyler stumbled out of the house, his face pale with shock, and Emily wasn't far behind, her voice a high-pitched scream of fury. "You're insane," she shrieked. "You'll go to jail for this." I didn't say a word. I walked slowly, deliberately, toward the edge of the property where a surveillance camera blinked silently at me. It wasn't mine. It was theirs. I made sure to turn toward it, raising my hand slightly as if to say, "Look at me. I'm unarmed. This isn't what it seems." Then, as if by sheer coincidence, I walked to the truck's cab and calmly retrieved the clipboard I had planted there earlier, filled with falsified delivery papers. The papers showed I had been making a delivery nearby and had experienced a mechanical failure with the brakes. I called 911 myself, reporting the incident as a horrible accident caused by a sudden loss of control. I made sure to sound shaken, but cooperative. When the deputies arrived, they examined the scene, my truck and the supposed mechanical failure. The house was damaged, but no one was hurt. The officers took my statement, and Tyler tried to scream about how I'd done it on purpose. "Do you have proof?" one deputy asked flatly. Tyler froze. The damage was damning, but there was no evidence, none that could link it to deliberate intent. I'd made sure of that. As the deputies let me go with nothing more than a citation for property damage, I saw the look in Emily's eyes, rage, disbelief, and something else, fear. And for the first time, I felt free. But the final act wasn't over yet. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered his final decision. Tyler and Emily sat across from me, their lawyer hunched over in defeat. Every lie, every betrayal, and every desperate ploy they had used against me had crumbled under the weight of the truth. The investigation into Tyler's depths, Emily's deceit, and their toxic manipulation painted such a damning picture that even their lawyer had stopped trying to defend them. The judge's voice was steady, but his words hit hard. Full custody of Jason and Caleb was awarded to me. Emily and Tyler were restricted to supervised visitation, pending further review. I sat back, my hands steady on the table in front of me, feeling the tension in my chest finally ease. Tyler looked like a ghost, slumped in his seat, while Emily seethed with barely contained fury, her face twisted in the realization that the life she and Tyler had carefully built was falling apart, piece by piece. As we left the courtroom, Emily made one last attempt to corner me in the hallway. "This isn't over," she spat, her voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, but you've only delayed the inevitable." I looked her dead in the eye, my voice calm and steady. "It's over for you. The boys will never see the kind of people you and Tyler have become. That's my promise." She stood there, speechless, as I turned and walked away. Jason and Caleb were waiting for me at the other end of the hallway, with my lawyer just outside. The air was crisp, the cool breeze a reminder that it was time for a fresh start. The boys were quiet on the drive home, but as we pulled into the driveway, Jason spoke up. "Dad," he said hesitantly, "are we going to be okay now?" I nodded, my grip on the steering wheel firm but gentle. "We're going to be better than okay, son. I promise." That night, after putting them to bed, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of whiskey, staring at the stars. The road that had brought me here had been brutal, filled with betrayal, loss, and anger. But in the end, I had reclaimed what mattered most. For men like me, who've given everything to their families, often at the cost of their own happiness, there's a lesson in all of this. The world won't always give you justice, not unless you fight for it with everything you've got. But there's a line you can't cross, even in revenge. I had towed that line, came close to losing myself, but in the end, I found something far more important: my pride, my integrity, and the love of my sons. As the night stretched on, I realized the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine now, and for the first time in years, I was driving towards something worth fighting for. I took a long sip, the whiskey burning smooth, and whispered to the stars, "Here's to moving forward." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.